Does Biden want to escalate before Trump takes over?
The right and the left are two legs on the same man, and they're walking in the same direction. Maybe one leg has a limp, the other one's club-footed, but they're walking in the same direction. I think that you have to try to understand American policy generally as adhering to a general overall strategy, and not necessarily that it's one side against the other. They're both moving in the same direction. I think that escalation of conflict in Europe is in the interests of the power structure overall. And I don't think Trump is against that at all. I think that this act will make it easier for Trump, for example, to withdraw from NATO. If you know that you're going to try to plunge continental Europe into military conflict, you want to be out of it. And if you're a signatory to an organization like NATO that obliges you to become involved in that conflict, then you want to pull out of that. Ideally, you would pull out of that before you start conflict in Europe. But either way, I think that both the national OCGFC and the military industrial complex OCGFC, the nationalistic OCGFC, both of them are on board with the destabilization project in Europe, which has been primarily under Biden, has been progressing primarily under Biden, who's a neocon. But the A national OCGFC have no problem whatsoever with the destabilization of Europe and plunging Europe into a conflict. I think that that's the plan. Trump with Ukraine is saying that he would end the conflict. However, we should remember that although the Trump supporters are always very proud to say that during Trump's administration, he didn't start any new wars, he also didn't end any. He didn't end any ongoing military conflicts that the U.S. was involved in. He didn't pull out of Syria. He didn't pull out of Iraq. He didn't pull out of Afghanistan. He didn't pull out of Somalia. He didn't do anything. He didn't start conflicts, yes, but he didn't end any either. So it's possible that this would continue because I think, as I've been saying, I think that the plan is for the Ukraine. The plan has always been for the Ukraine conflict to spread. That's always been the plan. And if you wonder why, there's many reasons why. I've talked about it many times, but you can just look at the fact that Ukraine almost in total now is owned by BlackRock. The agreement between the U.S. and Europe after World War II was you be on the front line against the Soviets, and we, the Americans, will guarantee global trade for you, the security of global trade for you. Because Europe benefited the most from globalization, so-called globalization, much more than the Americans actually did, even though they're the most famous for globalization. So the agreement was you stand against the Soviets on the front line, and in return for that, we will guarantee your prosperity and the security of your prosperity. The appropriate way to end that chapter is because they never actually did have to stand up against the Soviets. The places where the Cold War was hot, it was in the global South. Now you're going to have to stand up against Russia and actually stand up against Russia. And that will be the termination of our contract. That's the termination of our deal. Now we're no longer going to guarantee prosperity and security for trade for you. We want Europe to be a dependency. And we're not going to take care of your trade everywhere else. In all the other parts of the world, we're not going to secure the trade routes for you. And now you just have to die on the hill of fighting Russia. The time has come. You have to try to have an overall concept, an overall understanding or comprehension of what's going on in the world in reality. And then when any individual thing happens, you can understand it within the context of that overall understanding and comprehension of what is the general trend being undertaken by the power structure. if you understand that, and if you understand the general power dynamics and the way that power operates, and the especially private sector power, then you can more easily understand individual events and individual pieces of news, individual incidents and things that happen. You can put it in a context and then understand it better. For example, like being able to understand that there's no real conflict between the Republicans and the Democrats in terms of, especially in terms of foreign policy.
If then USA would move out of NATO, would this mean de-escalation of conflict in Europe?
No,
Automatically, no.
no. It protects America from having to be involved in the conflict that is intended to be catastrophic across Europe. Now, this isn't inevitable. This isn't inevitable. I'm just saying this seems to be the plan. This seems to be what they would like to have happen. Europe has choices. Europe could be reasonable. They could be rational. And they could make intelligent choices. And the intelligent and there are some signs that they might do that. But this is where you have a problem of the people who are in charge of your governments, and the most powerful players in your societies are rational and reasonable in terms of pursuing their own private interests and not the interests of their nations. If the interests of the nation were to ever be expressed and manifest by the governments, they have choices. They could delink from the United States. They could make, they could reconcile their relationship with Russia and with China and with the global South. This is what they should do. And they should support, for example, the invocation of Article 6, rather than letting the United States selectively isolate themselves from the world, which is what they're moving towards, a selective isolation. By selective, I mean we're going to continue to be the overlords of Europe, but not necessarily everywhere else. America specifically. The A-national OCGFC will remain the unipolar power. This is another important thing to understand, that when we talk about multipolarity, polycentric, whatever, global order, that's within the context of there still being a unipolar superpower, which is the private sector, which is private sector power, which is the A-national OCGFC. So America is selectively withdrawing from the world. You could be proactive. Europe could be proactive and say, no, you're not withdrawing. We're leaving you. You know, like, you can't fire me, I quit, kind of thing. They could do that. It's possible. There are signs that Europe may get some kind of sense and try to disassociate themselves from the United States. Maybe. Unlikely, but it's possible. The point is they do have that choice. There are things that they could do to not follow the path that has been laid for them by America and by the military-industrial complex and by the A-national OCGFC. There are ways that they could avoid that path. I don't think they're going to avoid it. And by every indication, what's happening right now with the UK being stupid enough to approve launching these missiles against Russia, it doesn't bode well. Now, that doesn't mean that Russia is about to launch an attack on London. Russia is not also insane. If you know the real way that the trends are going, the trajectory is going, the irreversible trajectory, this part is irreversible. Now, Europe has choices. They have things that they can possibly do. They won't make the right choices, but there are right choices they could make. But a choice that cannot be made is whether or not the global economy is going to shift the center of gravity to the global South. That is going to happen. There isn't another thing that can happen. That is an irreversible trajectory that must happen. And this is exactly why the A-national OCGFC are doing what they're doing, because they know that this is an inevitability that must happen. And we want to try to get in front of that and try to control that as much as possible and try to not be cut out of the picture and try to determine how it goes so that we can try to make the next 100 years look like the last 100 years in terms of our own private benefit. Once you understand the overall trajectory of the power structure, the global power structure, then it allows you to understand better why this policy or that policy actually is being implemented, as opposed to the rhetorical reason that is offered to the public as to why this policy is being implemented.